There was a microphone because my mother always had a microphone. It was a graduation party in the front room of her studio on Putnam Avenue in Zanesville, Ohio. 80 people, folding chairs, a sheet cake from Kroger with my name on it in blue gel, and a rented sound system because Bobby Sloane did not speak to a room without one. Not ever. Not once in 31 years. She had a glass in one hand. She was very good at this. I need you to understand that she was genuinely, unusually good at standing in front of people. She said, "I've got 2 daughters, and the Lord gave me one of each." Little laugh from the room. She waited for it to finish. She always waited. This one got the brains. And then she put her hand on my sister's shoulder and said, "The other one got the rest of it." She didn't name what I didn't have. That's the craft of it. If she'd said looks, somebody could have argued. She said the rest of it, and left 80 people to fill in the blank themselves. And every single one of them filled it in the same way. The room laughed. Not everybody. Enough. My father looked at the carpet. My aunt looked at her phone. A woman named Tessie Prine, who had known me since I was 4, put her hand over her mouth. And I have never spoken to her about it, and I never will. I was 18 years old. There was a banner behind me with my name on it. There is a silver hand mirror on the 3rd shelf in my shop. It has been there 11 years, facing the wall. It was my mother's. Every girl in that town stood in front of it. That's what it was for. You'd finish a girl's hair, and you'd stand behind her and hold that mirror up so she could see the back of her own head. 400 girls. Maybe more. 31 years. I'll tell you at the end why it faces the wall, and what happened the one time I turned it around. Before I tell you about the phone call my sister made, the one where she told me the condition, tell me what time it is where you are, and what town you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. I make wigs. That's the short version, and it's wrong in about 9 ways, so let me give you the real one. I have a shop in Columbus, 55 miles from that front room. 2 chairs, a back room with about 40 canvas blocks on shelves, and a kettle that whistles flat. Most of my clients are in treatment, chemotherapy mostly, some alopecia, some radiation, a few trichotillomania, and about 1 in 12 is a woman in her 70s whose hair simply left, and nobody told her that was a thing that happens. They come in about 10 days after their first infusion, which is roughly when it starts. And they are almost always alone, because they have told everyone that they are fine. Here's how it goes. It goes the same way basically every time. She sits down. She does not look in the mirror. That's the tell. A woman who is about to lose her hair will find something else to look at within 4 seconds of sitting in a chair, and it is usually her own hands. And then almost all of them say some version of the same thing, and I want you to hear it because it took me 3 years to understand it. They say, "I know it's stupid." They say, "I know it's stupid. I've got a tumor the size of a plum and I'm sitting here crying about my hair." Or, "My husband says it doesn't matter." Or, the one that gets me every time, "I know I should just be grateful." And what I say every time is, "It's not stupid, and I'm not going to tell you it isn't happening." I do not tell them they're beautiful. I have never once said that sentence in that chair in 11 years. And I want to be very clear that this is not humility or some technique I read about. It's that nobody in that chair is asking me that question, not one of them. They are asking a completely different question, and it is, am I going to still look like myself? Those are not the same question. My mother spent 31 years unable to tell the difference between them. And honestly, so did I, until a 74-year-old woman explained it to me in 2014. And I'll get to her. The actual work is slower and less romantic than people think. You take a template of her head with plastic wrap and tape. You take a hair sample from the nape, which is where the color is truest. Everybody's crown is lighter than they think. Sun does that over 60 years. And then you spend somewhere between 30 and 90 hours pulling hair through a lace cap, with a hook about the size of an eyelash, 2 or 3 strands at a time. And every single one has to come out at the angle her own hair came out at. Or it will look like a wig. And she'll know. She'll never say it, and she'll wear it, and she'll know. That's the job. 2 strands at a time for 90 hours, so a woman can go to her granddaughter's confirmation and have nobody lean over to somebody else. My mother's business was called Sloane Studio of Poise. It was on Putnam Avenue for 31 years, and it did modeling classes, deportment, and pageant coaching. Miss Zanesville. County Fair Queens. A Miss Ohio contestant in 2004 who placed 4th and whose photograph was on that wall until the day it closed. There was a strip of black electrical tape on the floor. You stood on the tape. Every girl in that town stood on that tape at some point between the ages of 9 and 17. And my mother walked around you once, slowly, and then told you what you were. She was not wrong very often. That's the thing I've had to make room for. She could look at a 14-year-old and tell you what her jaw was going to do. She could tell which girls would photograph and which ones wouldn't. And she was right. And there is money in being right about that, and she made a living off it, in a town that did not have much. The whole place smelled like Aquanet. It still did the day they cleared it out, 4 years after she stopped teaching. That smell does not come out of drywall. I stood on the tape when I was 11. I want to tell you this exactly because I have told it wrong before. I used to tell it as a horror story, and it wasn't one, and the true version is worse. She walked around me once, and she said, "Okay." That's it. That's the entire thing she said. Okay. And then she went and got her book. She did not insult me. She did not say a single unkind word. She looked at her own 11-year-old, decided, and moved on. And she was not cruel about it. She was finished. Some part of her closed a file. My sister Lacey stood on that tape when she was 9, and my mother took 40 minutes. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know. I knew at 11. Everybody in that room knew at 11. And here's the part that I think matters most. I was not sad about it. Not then. 11-year-olds are practical. I decided at some point around then that I would simply be the useful one. And I got very good grades. And my mother told people I got very good grades. And it functioned. It functioned for 7 years. And then she picked up a microphone. I left that night. Not dramatically. I have heard people describe it dramatically, and it wasn't. I went into the back office where my paychecks from the Sunoco were in an envelope in the desk, and I counted $318, and I took it. And I put my house key on the desk, on top of the graduation card my mother had signed. Signed, not written in. Just, Mom, in the good handwriting she used for everything. I left before the cake. They told people I was dramatic. My mother told people I was dramatic for 11 years, and she was very consistent about it. And there are people in Zanesville who to this day believe that Bobby Sloane made a joke at a party and her oldest girl had a fit about it. That's not a metaphor for anything. That is literally what a number of adults in that town believe. And there's nothing to be done about it, and I stopped trying in about year 4. Bus to Columbus was $11, 55 miles. I want you to hold that number because it comes back. 55 miles. An hour and 10 minutes on Route 40 if you don't hurry. I got a job at a nursing home in Grandview doing laundry and then doing hair. Because they found out I could. Because I'd grown up in that studio and I could set a roller before I could ride a bike. 11 months of washing and setting for women between 78 and 96. That's where the actual education happened, not in the studio. In a linoleum room with a sink and 11 women a day. Because in a nursing home, nobody is competing. That's the whole thing. Nobody in that room was being ranked against anybody. They wanted to look like themselves. Like the version of themselves they had walked around inside for 60 years. And if you got it right, they'd get quiet. And if you got it wrong, they'd be polite about it, and you'd feel it for a week. One of them, a woman named Fern, told me, "Honey, I don't want to be pretty. I want to not be a stranger. 11 months. And I understood something my mother had spent 3 decades in the same industry never once considering. I met Evadelle Prout in the spring of 2014. She was the first head I ever made from scratch. And she was 74 the day she died. And I have to be careful how fast I go through the next part. She was 63 when she came in, breast first round. Retired from the Ohio Department of Transportation, where she had done something with bridge inspections for 31 years. The same 31 as my mother, which she thought was funny and which I never once found funny. She chewed cinnamon gum and put the wrappers in her shoe. I don't know why. I asked her twice. Both times she said, "Where else?" She sat down and she did not look in the mirror, and she looked at her hands, and she said, "I know this is stupid." And I was 22 years old and 11 months out of a nursing home laundry, and I said something I have never forgiven myself for, which was, "You're going to be beautiful." And Evadelle Prout looked up at me and said, "Oh, honey, no." Not angry, almost amused. "I'm 63 and I've got 2 of these," she gestured at her chest, "and one of them's coming off in March. I have not been beautiful since the Carter administration, and I did not come here for that." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, be useful." She pointed at her own head. "I have got a granddaughter graduating in May, and I want to walk in that gym, and I want her to look up and see her grandmother. Not a sick woman, not a brave woman, her grandmother. Can you do that or not?" I said I could do that. She said, "All right then, that's the job." That's the job. I have that written on an index card in her handwriting, taped inside a cabinet door in my back room. And it has been there 11 years, and I did not ask her to write it. She just did it one afternoon while I was in the other room. I opened the shop in 2018. Iva co-signed the lease, which I did not ask her to do either. Second cancer in 2019. Different one. Third in 2023. And by then, we both knew what the third one meant, even though nobody said it out loud for about 8 months. She came every Thursday, not for anything. She'd sit in the second chair with the newspaper and complain about grackles. I want to say one thing about her and then move on. Because if I stay here, I'll stay here. Iva Prout never once asked me why I don't speak to my mother. In 11 years. She knew. I told her in year 2. And she never asked me to explain it. And she never suggested I fix it. And she never said, "She's still your mother." Which is the sentence I have heard from approximately every other person alive. The only thing she ever said about it, one Thursday, out of nowhere, was, "55 miles is not very far." And I said, "I know." And she said, and went back to the paper. That was the entire conversation. It took 8 seconds. I have thought about it probably 2,000 times. My mother was diagnosed in September, ovarian, stage 3. I found out on a Tuesday from a cousin's post that I saw because the algorithm decided I should. She was 61. She'd closed the studio in 2021. Enrollment had been dying for a decade. That whole world was dying. There are not many people signing a 9-year-old up for deportment classes anymore. She started carboplatin in October. Here is the part that took me a long time to be able to say without heat in my voice. Between October and January, my family went to 3 different places for a wig. They went to a chain shop at the mall in Heath, which sells synthetic pieces off a shelf. And it did not work because it is a shelf. They went to a salon in Newark that does what's called a hand-tied topper, which is a real thing and can be done well. And it was not done well. And in December, they drove 2 hours and 10 minutes to a place in Cleveland and paid, I later learned, $2,600. And it was not right either. And by then, my mother had stopped going to church. 55 miles, Route 40, an hour and 10. I have made 200 in some of these. There are maybe 9 people in the state of Ohio who do what I do, and I am, and I say this flatly, better at it than 7 of them. They drove past me twice. My sister called on the 11th of January, First time in 4 years. Lacey is 29. She stayed. She was Miss Muskingum County in 2016, and she works at a bank now, and she has 2 little girls. And she bites the thumbnail on one hand only, which she has done since she was 6, and I could hear her doing it on the phone. Merritt, hi. Hi, Lace. She talked for about 4 minutes about nothing. Then she got to it. So Mom's had a really hard time with the hair thing.
I know, I've heard. Merritt, it's been really bad. She won't go anywhere. She won't go to Kroger. She had Dad go get her prescriptions. A pause. She hasn't left the house since like the 2nd week of December. I sat down, because I know exactly what that is. I see that specific thing about 11 times a year, and I know what it costs, and I know what happens to a woman who does that for 3 months. Okay, I said. Tell her to call me, or I'll call her. And my sister said, well, okay, so that's the thing. She'll let you do it, Lacey said. She will. Dad talked to her. Okay. But she can't know it's you. I want to describe what that felt like, and I've never been able to. The closest I've gotten is, it wasn't a shock. It was a recognition. Like hearing a song you'd forgotten you knew all the words to. Say that again. Merritt, say the sentence again, Lacey. She can't know it's from you. My sister's voice went up. Look, you'd do the work. We'd say we found somebody in Columbus. You'd get paid, obviously. We'd pay you full price. I'm not asking you to... She'd wear it. Yes. She'd wear it every day, and she'd tell people about it, and she'd never know. Yes. And I said, why? And my sister, and I'll give her this, she did not dodge it. She said it in one go, like she'd been carrying it up a hill. Because she says she can't take it from you. She says if she takes it from you, then you win. If she takes it from you, then you win. 12 years. A microphone. 80 people. And in the end, the thing that stood between my mother and leaving her house was a scoreboard that existed nowhere except inside her. I said no, not to the work. I want to be very precise because my sister has told this differently, and so have several people in Zanesville. What I said was, tell her I'll do it. Tell her I'll do it for free, and I'll do it better than anybody in this state will do it. But she has to know it's me. She has to say my name in the room. That's the only condition I've got. Lacey said, that's the same as saying no. And I said, I know. I did know. I want to be honest with you about that, because there is a version of this story where I am a woman who set a reasonable boundary, and there is another version where I knew exactly what I was doing, and I did it anyway. And I think the second one is closer. I could have taken the deal. I could have made a beautiful thing for my mother and let her believe a stranger did it. And she'd have gone to Kroger in February instead of April. And I would have known, and nobody else would have. I have gone around and around on that for 1.5 years. I still think I was right. I have simply stopped believing that being right is the end of the sentence. January, February, March, April. Nothing. My sister didn't call again. My father sent one text in February that said, I'm sorry it's like this, which is a sentence that does not have a person in it anywhere, and I did not answer it. And I want to tell you what I did instead during those 4 months, because it is the worst thing in this story, and there is no version where it isn't. I talked about my mother. Every Thursday. In the second chair. To a 74-year-old woman on her 3rd cancer. Eva went into hospice on the 22nd of February. Not a facility. Her own house on Wager Street, with a hospital bed in the front room where the couch had been. And a bird feeder outside the window that only ever got grackles, which she took personally. I went 4 times a week, sometimes 5. And I want to be exact about this because it is the thing I would take back. I spent the last 10 weeks of Evadelle Prout's life litigating my mother in her front room. Not the whole time, but some of every single visit. What Lacey said, what the condition meant, whether I should have taken the deal, What kind of woman drives past her own daughter's shop twice? Round and round and round. And Iva was on morphine by the end of March, and I was still doing it. The last real conversation we had was on the 9th of April. She was very tired. She had about 10 good minutes a day by then, and I did not know I was using one of them. I was going again. Something about my mother. And Iva put her hand up about an inch off the blanket, which was as much as she could do by then. Merritt. I'm sorry. I know I keep... Honey. She had to breathe in the middle. I don't have very many of these left, and you have spent about 9 of them on a woman in Zanesville. I have never in my life felt anything like that. And she saw my face and she said, and this is the last thing she ever said to me that was a whole thought. That's not a scold, that's information. She died on the 17th of April. Her granddaughter called me at 6 in the morning. I made the piece she was buried in. I'd made it in 2019 for the second one and rebuilt it twice. Her daughter asked me, and I did it that night, and I did it right. And I did not cry once while I was doing it, which is a thing I understand about myself now. I need to tell you one more thing about myself, and then we can get to the chair. In 2020, a 19-year-old came into my shop. Alopecia areata. Patchy, about 40% loss. And she had a lot of ideas about what she wanted. She wanted something that did not look like her. She wanted longer and lighter and a completely different texture. And she had photographs. And what I said to her was, that's not going to read as yours. You'll put it on and everybody who knows you will know. Which was true. Every word of it was accurate. Professionally, that is the correct assessment, and I would give the same assessment today. But I said it in about 4 seconds, flatly, before I asked her one single question about why she wanted it. I never asked her what she was doing that fall. I never asked if she was starting somewhere new where nobody knew her, which I found out about 2 years later from her aunt she was. She thanked me. She was very polite. She did not book. And she went somewhere else, and she got the long light one. And I saw a photograph of her in it, and it did not look like her, and she looked happy. I stood in my own back room the day I saw that photograph, and I thought, I walked around her once, and I said, okay, I am my mother's daughter. I found that out on a Tuesday in 2022, on the 3rd shelf of my own shop. And there is no distance in miles that fixes it. She came to the shop once, early March, in the middle of the 4 months, and I did not know she was coming. She had a knit cap on, and she had lost about 20 pounds, and she was still, I want to say this because it's true, she was still the most composed person who came through that door that entire week. She did not sit down. I'm not here about the hair, she said. Okay. I want to say one thing, and then I'll go. Okay? And my mother said this, I'm giving it to you whole, because if I trim it, I'm cheating. You want to know what I did wrong? I'll tell you what I did wrong. I said it in a room instead of in a car. Mom, that's it. That's the whole thing. Because Merritt, you were never going to be the pretty one, and every woman in that room already knew it. And the only person in this family who was going to spend the next 30 years pretending otherwise was you. I taught 400 girls. 400. And I have watched what happens to a girl whose mother tells her she's special, and then a stranger tells her the truth when she's 19. I've watched it about 40 times. 2 of those girls I still worry about, and one of them is dead. I was not going to let a stranger be the one who told you. So I told you first, and I told you early, and you got out of that town at 18 with $300 and you built a whole life. And there is not one person in Zanesville who has done what you've done. You're welcome. She put her hand on the door, and I'd do it again. I did not have anything. I want to be honest. I did not have one word. She was describing a thing that had actually happened to girls I actually knew. Tara Bickle is actually dead. That's a real person with a real headstone in Zanesville, and my mother was not using her as a rhetorical device.
She went to the funeral. My mother had a theory of the world, and it was cruel, and it was partly load-bearing, and I have never once been able to knock the whole thing down. She left. She got in my father's car, which he had kept running, and they drove 55 miles home. 3 weeks later, I told Iva about it, in the front room with the grackles, and she listened to the whole thing, all of it, my mother's entire speech. And when I was finished, she was quiet for a while, and then she said, "She didn't tell you the truth." "Iva, she kind of did." "No, listen to me." She had to stop and get her air. "She told the room the truth." I didn't say anything. If she wanted to tell you, she had 18 years and a car. Breath. She had a car, Merritt. She could have told you in a car any Tuesday of your whole life, and it would have been between the two of you, and you might even have thanked her for it later, God help us both. Breath. She did it with a microphone at your party in front of 80 people, and that's not protecting you from the room, honey. She looked at me. That's recruiting it. My mother came on the 6th of May, 19 days after Iva's funeral, alone. She drove herself, which she was not supposed to be doing. No appointment. She came in at about 2:10 on a Tuesday, and the bell went, and I came out from the back, and she was standing there in the knit cap. And she said, "Merritt, I would like you to do it." My name, in the room, out loud. I want to tell you I felt something enormous. I didn't. I felt like I'd been standing up for a long time, and somebody had finally let me sit down. I said, "Okay, come on back." She sat in the chair, and she did not look in the mirror 4 seconds. She looked at her own hands. 61 years of that woman's life. 31 years of walking around other people's daughters on a strip of black tape. And she sat in my chair and did the exact same thing every single woman does. I said, "Can you take the cap off for me?" She said, "In a minute." I said, "That's fine, take as long as you want." It took about 90 seconds. I have watched that 90 seconds probably 300 times, and I have never once looked away from it. And I didn't that day either. She took the cap off, and I said what I say, which is not, "You look fine," and is not, "It's not that bad," and is certainly not, "You're beautiful." I said, "Okay, let's get you back to yourself." And my mother said, "That's a good line." And I said, "It's not a line." She said, "No, I know." I did the wrap. I took the nape sample. Her color under the gray was a much warmer brown than she'd been wearing it for 20 years, which happens. Everybody drifts cool as they age because that's what the box tells them to do. I said, "You've been going too ash." And she said, "I have been going too ash since 2009, which is the closest my mother has ever come to a joke at her own expense. And I laughed, and it startled both of us. And then, while I had my hands on the back of her head, she said, "That thing I said to you in March." "Yeah." "About telling you first, so a stranger wouldn't." "Yeah." "You didn't answer me." I kept working. That's the good thing about this job. You always have somewhere to put your hands. And I said, "You didn't tell me the truth. You told the room the truth." She was very still. "You had a car," I said. "You had 18 years and a car. And you could have said it to me any Tuesday, and it would have been between us, and I might even have thanked you. You did it with a microphone. That's not protecting me from the room." I said, "That's recruiting it." My mother sat in my chair for a long time. And then she said, "Who told you that?" And I said, "A woman you never met." It took me 61 hours over 5 weeks. 2, 3 strands at a time. She came for the fitting on the 11th of June. I put it on her. I cut it in. You always cut it in on the person. That's not optional. And I did about 40 minutes of work that I could not tell you the individual steps of, because at a certain point your hands are just doing it. And when it was finished, I did the thing. I went to the 3rd shelf, and I turned that silver hand mirror around, and I stood behind my mother and held it up so she could see the back of her own head. Same mirror, Same motion, 400 girls. The handle has a hairline crack in it from 1994 when Lacey dropped it and blamed me. And I got in trouble for it, and I did not do it. And I have never once brought that up, and I'm not bringing it up now. My mother looked in the mirror for a long time, and then she said, "Oh, that's it. That's the whole thing," she said. "Oh." And I stood there behind my own mother, holding her own mirror. And I understood that I had waited 12 years for a sentence, and I was never going to get one. And that this was what I was getting instead, and that it was actually enough. Not everything, enough. Then she said, "What do I owe you?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "Merritt." And I said, "Mom, nothing." She put a check on the counter anyway for $800, which is about a third of what it's worth. And I have never cashed it. And it is in the cabinet next to Iva's index card. My mother finished treatment in August. Ovarian at stage 3 is not a story with a guaranteed ending, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. She was clear at her scan in November. She has scans every 3 months, and every 3 months I do not sleep the night before, which is a thing I would not have predicted about myself. She went to Kroger on the 14th of June, 3 days after the fitting. My sister told me that. She said Mom went to Kroger and ran into 2 people and stopped and talked to both of them. 6 months in a house. I think about the 4 months I cost her. I know all the arguments. I made the condition, she refused it. That was her decision and not mine. And if I had taken Lacey's deal, I would have been agreeing that my name was the problem. I know all of that. I believe most of it. And I also know that a 61-year-old woman did not leave her house between December and June, and that I could have ended it in January. And that both of those things are true at the same time. And anybody who tells you a boundary is free has never actually drawn one that costs somebody else. Lacey and I don't have a word for it. We text. She sends me pictures of the girls. She has never once said she was sorry, and I have stopped expecting it. Because I think she genuinely does not experience herself as having done anything. That's the part people don't tell you about the favored child. It's not that they lie about it. It's that from inside that position, there is nothing to see. She was 9, and my mother took 40 minutes, and she has no memory of it being unusual. And I believe her. My father. Merritt Sloane is 63, and he collects transistor radios and has never fixed a single one of them. He came to the shop by himself in October with a bag of tomatoes from his garden that nobody asked for. He stood there for about 10 minutes and did not sit down and did not say one single thing about the graduation, or the microphone, or the 11 years. Then, at the door, he said, "I should have took that mic off her." And I said, "Yeah, Dad." And he said, "Yeah." And he left. That's it. That's what I got. And I've decided that it's what there is. And he's 63, and I take the tomatoes. I have 3 chairs now. I hired a girl named Priya in September, who is better with the fine work at 24 than I was at 30. I do 1 head a month for nothing. There's no fund and no name for it, and I don't tell anybody about it except the oncology social workers at 2 hospitals who send me people, and they know to just call. The first one I did was a 31-year-old with 2 kids who cried in my parking lot for 11 minutes before she came in, and I know because I watched her from the window, and I let her have it. There's one more thing. In February, during the 4 months, right in the middle of everything, the 19-year-old from 2020 came back. She's 24 now. She'd moved to Cincinnati and come back. She had the long light one on, and it still did not look like her. And she sat down in my chair, and she said, "I know this is stupid, but..." And I stopped her, and I said, "Can I ask you something first?" And she said, "Okay." And I said, "What are you doing this fall?" She looked at me like I'd asked her something in another language. Nobody had ever asked her that in a chair. I hadn't asked her that in a chair. She told me. It took about 20 minutes. It was about a job, and about a man, and about her mother. And almost none of it was about hair. And then we made her something. It's the best work I have ever done in my life. Not the most technical. the best. And nobody will ever see it and know. Because that's the entire point of it. I did not apologize to her for 2020. I thought about it for 2 weeks, and I decided that an apology would have been for me, and that she came in for a head of hair, and that the correct apology was to ask the question I had not asked 4 years late, and then shut up and do the work. There are 2 women I have to be fair to before I stop talking, and one of them is me, and I'm going to do that one last. My mother. She was not wrong about the world. That's what took me 12 years, and it's the only genuinely useful thing I've got. She was right that people get ranked. She was right that a stranger will do it to you at 19 and it will be brutal. She was right that 400 girls in a small Ohio town were going to walk into that, and she was one of about 2 adults in the county who was going to tell them anything true about it. She was right about the world, and she was wrong about the room. Because there is a version of my mother, and I can see her, she is completely real, she is about 11 degrees away from the woman I actually got, who says the same true thing to her daughter in a car on Route 40, and is the best mother in that town. The difference between those 2 women is not honesty. Both of them are honest. The difference is that one of them needed 80 people to agree with her first. The women in the chair. I have never told one of them that she's beautiful, and I want to say plainly why. Because I think it's the whole thing. It's not that beauty doesn't matter. It obviously matters. Anybody who says it doesn't has never sat with somebody the day her eyebrows go. It's that beautiful is a ranking, and a ranking requires other people. And my entire job takes place in a room with one person in it. They are not asking me where they place. They are asking me if they are still going to be themselves. My mother spent 31 years unable to hear the difference between those 2 questions. She had a genuine gift, and she pointed it at the wrong one. For 3 decades, on 400 girls. And it did not make her a monster. It made her the second most useful person she could have been. And me. I don't get to be clean about this. I did to a 19-year-old, in 4 seconds, the exact thing my mother did to me. Walked around her once and said okay, and she went somewhere else, and I did not think about it again for 2 years. And I let a woman refuse to leave her house for 4 extra months, over a condition that I set, and that I still think was right, and that I could have dropped any day I wanted to. And I spent the last 10 weeks of the best friendship of my life talking about a woman in Zanesville, in a front room, to somebody who had 10 good minutes a day. That's not a scold. That's information. I'm not the good one in this story. Nobody is the good one in this story. There is just a woman who got told something true in the worst possible way, and another woman 55 miles up Route 40, and about 12 years of nobody driving. So let me ask you honestly, and I want the real answer, not the kind one. If your sister called you and said, she'll let you do it, but she can't know it's you, would you have taken the deal? Would you have made the beautiful thing and let her believe a stranger did it and gotten her out of that house in January? I've had a year and a half and I still don't know, and the harder one. My mother said she told me early, so a stranger wouldn't tell me late. Some of you are going to say she was right. Was she? Tell me, I read every one. Everything in this video is fictional, written for storytelling and reflection. If it reminded you of somebody, I hope it reminded you gently. Somebody telling you a hard truth is not the same as somebody needing a room to agree with them first. You are allowed to know the difference. The right people tell you in the car,